Do we have proper expectations for new Auburn Tiger Marcus Bragg? Also, Bryan Harsin comes in almost last in On3's SEC coaches rankings. Are they right or are they wrong? We tell you on today's Locked On Auburn.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's a Charlie Tuesday here on the show. He gets back in town from his vacation, and he's ready to hop on Locked On Auburn. While you were away, Charlie 5, the Auburn Tigers added an edge. We assume he's going to play edge. He played a bunch of different places at Western Kentucky, but a defensive lineman, Marcus Bragg. I was pretty honest with my opinion. I was pretty honest with what I see him doing at Auburn on yesterday's show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this addition, what it means for him, what it means for Auburn.
It's great for him, I guess, if he if he gets a chance to play. I think the biggest thing that I agreed the most with you is that it didn't really do anything other than depth for this year. It helps nothing for depth beyond when we lose a lot of guys. So it's really, really strange as far as like why this guy was sort of the one you singled out when there's still some there's still some pretty talented dudes that were available, that are still available in the portal, that play a similar position. That I don't know why it just seemed like this one hit hard and quick. He came to visit, and it was over. Since it's just, this is a result of we go through this cycle where it's like we don't get a guy, and then we get a guy, and he's not as good as we want it to be. But that's the result of there's not really that whole lot of people left, so we're not really going to be adding a whole lot of difference makers right now. But and we missed. There's portal guys we could have landed earlier, and this is just sort of how it's fallen now. And I just wish. Another thing you said great. I wish we could have found like a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore. I'm looking at guys right now with Quayshawn Fuller, who has 4 years to play. Mm-hmm. There's just so many dudes that I feel like we could have had a shot. Could have pursued that. I think would benefit this team in the long run a lot more than Bragg will.
Right, and it's interesting.
More than likely next year.
Yeah, Charlie 5, a month or two ago, we were kind of doing shows about setting expectations for the type of transfers you can expect to add at this part of the year and this part of the whole process. And we talked about guys that would come in and not be an impact in 2022, but were pieces for the future. We thought we'd see that, maybe redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores in the trenches on both sides of the ball on offense and defensive line. And I think we thought that we would see that possibly at wide receiver and possibly a defensive back. And it's funny because the first one, I believe I have my order right, the first one post-spring that was added was DeZalen Worsham, the wide receiver from Miami, and he checked all of those boxes. A guy that I don't think is going to contribute in 2022, but I think will have the ability to contribute after that. But all the other ones are not what we predicted at all.
No.
The Memphis defensive lineman,
other than
he's one and done.
Yeah, one and done.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Will he even play? I don't know. Will he even really get to play?
Yeah. And then, Marcus Bragg is the same way. And then I guess Coy Moore. Does check those boxes. I just think, I think he'll play a lot in 2022. But yeah, it's just kind of funny because we were like, all right, set expectations. And it's like, well, it's either been what we thought or depth pieces that have 1 year left of eligibility, which is just really not what I expected here.
Yeah, like I just don't get what good does Bragg really do you? What good does, in the long run, what does Bragg really, he's not really overly fast. We're trying to add a pass rusher. He's not really going to be a super huge threat off the edge unless it's just some magical developmental thing that happens between now and fall. Like, I don't know it's a weird ad that doesn't seem to really benefit either party. It doesn't seem to benefit him at all. And I don't really see how it benefits us other than just having a warm body.
Yeah. And we touched on that a little bit yesterday. We don't know what his personal goals are. We don't know if, geography played into it. I don't know why it would. He's from Miami, but we don't know what his personal goals are. His goal may have been to be an SEC football player. I don't know. And if that's the case, he achieved his goal. Props to him. There was a big discussion in the Locked On Auburn Discord throughout the day on Monday about this. And a lot of folks chiming in different ways. I think everybody agrees. It's like, okay, it's great that Auburn gets to have a guy like him as the fourth, maybe fifth edge rusher on this team. It's like, yeah, I think that's great. I think it's really, really good. I think Auburn gets more out of this than Bragg does. And so, the fans that are involved in this will be like, yeah, okay, great, sweet. But another note that I thought was interesting, and I think this was actually a YouTube comment. I'm sorry I don't have the username pulled up to read this. But the gist of what they said was, perhaps they wanted to go the route of getting a guy that was done after this year, so it would not impact the sales pitch to recruits. I mean, they're going after a ton of talented edge guys out of high school. And one of the things we talk about with John Garcia all the time when he comes on is, pitching early playing time, the quick path to playing time.
Right. And
that sales pitch does not change with the addition of Bragg.
Yeah, it doesn't. But like, does adding a redshirt sophomore who is just literally Dylan Brooks and this guy next year, is that really that much of a deterrent to somebody like some high profile edge guy, unless you want to bring in multiple of those guys? Like, is it really that big of a deterrent? To be honest, I just think this is one of the only guys that we could get, if I'm just being quite frank. I hate to be super negative like that, but we missed on the kid from UCLA who would have been a one and done, but he actually had a fairly decent amount of production. Isidore, or something, I believe was his last name.
Right.
Quayshawn Fuller just basically said, well, I'm not interested at all. And he would have had 4 years to play. It just kind of seemed like, oh, this guy popped up. He was interested in us. He came on a visit and we took him.
I get it.
It's just, we had to have a body and we just took him.
I get it. Absolutely. All right. So on 3 ranked, all of the SEC head coaches, they were not kind to Bryan Harsin. Were they right? Were they not? We tell you in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Charlie 5 has been on the show to talk about this line, and Charlie 5, I'll actually bring you back on for your thoughts. So BetOnline for their college football futures, as far as win totals for the Tigers in 2022, it opened at 5.5. It has now moved to 6. Do you still take the over on that, Charlie 5?
6 is a good number. That's a tough number because I kind of feel like that's where we'll land, somewhere around 6. So I would probably just stay away from that bet, I think.
Yeah.
or if there's a way to bet that exact number, that's what I would do. I'd probably bet that exact number.
Fair enough. But hey, if you still think Auburn is 7-5 or better, head over to BetOnline. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Charlie 5. Looking at On3's SEC coaching rankings, I'm just going to go in order.
Yep.
Is that cool? I'm going to go in order.
Sure.
Spoiler, it's going to take a minute to get to Bryan Harsin. All right, number 1, Nick Saban, Alabama. Number 2, Kirby Smart, Georgia. Number 3, Brian Kelly, LSU? Question mark? Okay. Number 4, Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M. Too high, but I get it. Number 5, Mark Stoops, Kentucky. Number 6, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. Number 7, Sam Pittman, Arkansas. Number 8, Mike Leach, Mississippi State. Number 9, Josh Heupel, Tennessee. Number 10, Shane Beamer, South Carolina. Number 11, Billy Napier, Florida. Then here's Bryan Harsin at 12. Of the 14 head coaches in the SEC, they have Bryan Harsin 12th. Then Eli Drinkwitz of Missouri 13th. And then in last at 14, Clark Lee of Vanderbilt. So when I first saw this, and I was introduced to this list when I was doing a radio hit on WNSP with Dave Schultz Monday afternoon. And they're like, yeah, they had Bryan Harsin at 12. What are your thoughts on that? My gut reaction, Charlie 5, was that is way too low.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about it. And like, I don't have a strong argument for him being better than any of the folks that are in front of him. My gut is Mike Leach. But how can you say that when you blew a 28-3 lead against him at Jordan-Hare? And then like Billy Napier, I'm actually surprised he's at 11 with all the hype around him. And then Shane Beamer is another one. But like, you lost to him. You lost to him last year.
Yeah.
And so all the other folks in front of him, Sam Pittman, you beat him. But like, Sam Pittman's just using so much less and doing just as much as you. So I have a hard time moving him up any. Am I being too critical here?
I think maybe just a little bit, because if on one hand you say you can't be ahead of, if you say you can't be ahead of Shane Beamer or Shane Beamer or who's the other one that beat us? Mike Leach. Yeah. We stroked Sam Pittman and we stroked Lane Kiffin. I mean, the biggest robbery in this whole thing is Mark Stoops not being number 3.
That is true. That is accurate.
Mark Stoops is without a doubt the number 3 coach in the conference. He has just been unbelievable at Kentucky, and talking about doing more with less.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Heupel, you played an East schedule. Him being at 9, there seems to be a lot of hype for a guy that got hired that they didn't even want.
Sure. Yeah.
And then Shane Beamer, it just is what
I think there's probably more energy around Beamer because, the way they've added guys in the portal, he's probably won a little bit of favor for that. Yeah. The addition of Spencer Rattlers, I think a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
now their schedule stinks. It's tough for them. So I don't know if it's really going to matter when you look at it game by game, but still, yeah. I get the argument.
Sure. But yeah, if you really, if you make an argument for, there's probably an equally strong argument against putting Bryan Harsin ahead of those, just by the way, the fallout of what happened after the season, the turmoil that you feel like is going to happen again, unless he pulls off a miracle season, you're going to face the same exact thing again. So they're kind of projecting that, and they even say as much in the little write-up, talking about how it's not a good fit. He survived the off season. But more than likely you're going to go through the same thing again. It's just, you're on your 3rd offensive coordinator in 2 years, in year 2. So there is a lot of things against him. I still feel like he's a good football coach.
I do too.
I feel like he's a middle of the pack SEC guy. He's just had a bad first year with some bad breaks.
Yeah. And sorry, I keep talking over you. You're freezing every now and then. I think in 3 years, you could see him above Mike Leach. I think you see him above Shane Pittman. I think you honestly could see him above Lane Kiffin. I think that's eventually going to fizzle out. I just don't know if Bryan Harsin's going to get the time that he needs. That's my biggest concern of it all. And the other frustrating thing about this, Charlie 5, is everybody's counting out Auburn this year. 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 is their ceiling. Yada yada yada. You're seeing it everywhere. Last in the SEC West. But if they go out and finish 4th in the SEC West, behind your Bamas, your A&Ms, let's say Ole Miss does what they're supposed to do, and then maybe Auburn edges out LSU and Arkansas. You're not going to see him shoot up these lists, even though he vastly will overachieve. If he does that, he will vastly overachieve what everybody is asking him to do. And I just don't think he's really going to be set up for them to give that back to him, which is totally ridiculous and totally unfair.
Yeah, but I'm wondering who compiles these lists, because I guess it's
they got
Jesse Simonton. I just feel like coaches, like people that are in football, maybe not reporters, but like if it was a coaches poll type thing and Harsin were to win 8 games, they would say, holy cow, the situation that he was in and he won 8 games, this dude's for real. I think like real football people would note it, would give him the credit where it's due, because to win 8 games with this roster, with everything he's been through, I think that would be a magnificent feat that he should get recognition for.
All right. So for folks listening or watching, where would you rank Bryan Harsin? 12 still feels low to me. I think 5 years from now, I'd rather have Harsin than Beamer. I think 5 years from now, I'd rather have Harsin than Pittman, even though I really like Pittman. The Heupel thing is super interesting, but I think if you look at both of what they've done so far, I think Heupel's is better. His situation is better. His path to 8 wins is significantly easier right now. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how much of those arguments are fair and how much of them are just me being a homer, though, if I'm being real.
I think a good question that where you would rank him is, who would you rather have than him? Just go through the list. Who would you rather have than Bryan Harsin?
All right, so let's go through it. I'd rather have Saban. I'd rather have Smart.
Just go through the list.
I'd rather have Kelly. I'd rather have Jimbo. I'd rather have Stoops. I think I'd rather have Kiffin.
Yeah.
I think in a vacuum, I'd rather have Harsin than Pittman.
Yes.
I definitely would rather have Harsin than Leach. I think I'd rather have Harsin than Heupel. I'd rather have Harsin than Beamer. I'd rather have Napier than Harsin, I think. And then obviously I'd have Harsin over Drinkwitz.
I agree.
And Lee. So that moves them up.
So we have him like 8.
Yeah, which is what my gut tells me. Well done. Well done in pointing out that exercise.
That's probably where I would have him.
8 sounds more reasonable.
I would take. Yeah, exactly. Like Shane Beamer, I don't want Shane Beamer over Bryan Harsin.
No.
I just don't. And then every guy you just said, I don't want Sam Pittman. I'm sorry, like this. That's just a.
I think Pittman works at Arkansas. I don't think he works
anywhere else. Right.
I'm not gonna say anywhere else, but I don't think it works everywhere for sure. For sure.
Exactly. And he's got Kendall Browse. Like, let's not pretend he doesn't have Kendall Browse as the offensive coordinator. So that's a big plus. When that goes away, what happens? So
yeah. So is Harsin better than the 8th coach in the SEC right now? Let us know in the Locked On Auburn Discord or on YouTube or on Twitter, wherever. All right. Auburn baseball wins their first game in Omaha since 1997. Lindsay Crosby of Auburn Daily and Locked On MLB Prospects will join us to break all of that down and what's in front of the Tigers. But before that, Charlie 5, how can people find you, hear you, support you, and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Find me on Twitter at @the_Charlie_5. AuburnLive.com, the corner message board every single day in the Locked On Auburn Discord. Links in the description. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Dad Bod Golf Pod, talking U.S. Open results, Live Tour, all kind of crazy stuff going on in golf. A lot of fun.
And joining us now here on Locked On Auburn Baseball's Lindsay Crosby, of course, with Auburn Daily and Locked On MLB Prospects. The first win in Omaha for the Tigers since 1997. It feels good. It feels good. Feels even better that it was against Stanford, which is our boss's alma mater, the founder of Locked On Podcast Network. He went to Stanford, David Locke. So, yeah, it felt really good. He didn't answer my text when I sent him War Eagle afterwards, though.
Yeah, I did hear that there's a job posting for your job, though. So that's fun. So Auburn was 0-4 against Stanford. Like, this is the wildest stat to me. Auburn's only played like 16 College World Series games in existence, and 4 of them were losses to Stanford.
What in the world?
So this is Auburn's last College World Series victory since 1997, which was Tim Hudson's team.
Right.
And that year, they opened the College World Series with a loss to Stanford. They beat Rice, I believe. And then they closed the College World Series with a loss to Stanford. So we have avenged that. Right. I went in my backyard, cut a tree down, burned it.
Okay.
Just in like victory over beating Stanford. No, just great outing. And to me, the story of the game ends up being Trace Bright. There was questions about why Trace Bright over Mason Barnett. We kind of explained yesterday. They feel more confident with what they're going to get as far as the floor of Trace Bright. And then they felt like his ceiling was close enough where it wasn't a big deal to start Bright over Barnett. Obviously, you can see, gives up a couple of 4 hits in the first 2 innings and then settles down. Sits at one point, sits down 7 straight Cardinal. There's no S on it, right? It's just Cardinal.
Trees.
7 straight trees.
Right.
You know what it is? Instead of Cardinal, just call them Couchers because they're going home.
Got him.
And
Couchers.
And it's something where we were expecting a different starting pitcher. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so kind of threw everybody off. And it's funny. I tweeted before the game when the lineup came out and I was like, well, I got this wrong in the preview. I'll have a scouting report ready in about 20 minutes. And I got a text from somebody with the team. It was like, hey buddy, we did the same thing you did. It's fine.
Well, the guy that they saved can pitch tomorrow. Oh wait, they're done. They're gone.
They lost. No, the guy that they saved they actually brought in once they got the lead today.
Oh, okay.
And then what happened is he probably gave it up.
Yikes.
Yeah. Thanks to walking in Bobby Pierce in the 6th, and then allowing the loudest hitter on the planet.
I've never been a pitcher before, and I never will be. But I would imagine walking in a run has to be the worst feeling in the world outside of like giving up a grand slam.
I would think like giving up a walk-off on something stupid and then like a walk-off balk. And then right after that, walking in a run, especially in the playoffs, especially in an elimination game.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. And then Cole Foster, who has been deathly ill for like 4 days, goes and hits a bases clearing double off the top of the wall in left center. It's funny. Butch mentioned after the game, he's like, biggest hit of the kid's life. And I look up and he's like barely getting to second base and he's just head down because he's so exhausted. He got an IV after the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And they talked about, he was staying in the dugout as long as he possibly could in between innings and all of that. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Bigger moment. Michael Jordan's flu game or Cole Foster's sick game?
In Auburn history, Cole Foster.
Yep. Checks out.
Oh, hang on a second. You cannot. Sorry, this is during Ole Miss Arkansas, and Ole Miss just crushed a tank. That's a sad pig. You cannot leave a ball middle. I'm sorry. Okay, it's 9-3 Ole Miss in the top of the 5th right now.
So let's assume Auburn is playing Arkansas, and if that is not the case, it really doesn't matter who Auburn plays. I think from the Auburn perspective, regardless of who they play in their 3rd game in the College World Series, this is about really what Auburn does after Mason Barnett, because you can't go Skipper. I don't think you can go Burkhalter at this point. So what do you imagine this pitching staff looking like tomorrow? Or today when this goes out?
Today. You need Barnett to go as deep as you can. I mean, that's just kind of goes without saying. You need more like a UCLA type performance where he's going as long as possible. After that, I'm guessing you're going to see some sort of combination of Carson Swilling, the veteran. You're going to see a Chase Alsop, a young guy who they really like. And you're going to see a Chase Isbell, who is somebody that I know that Auburn fans haven't been very impressed with. Chase Isbell. He's in the same boat that Tommy Sheehan's in. And Butch Thompson mentioned this the other day about guys who had a partial Tommy John procedure in the offseason. They've been recovering, and they are kind of finally getting to that point of being fully healthy and back to able to do what they do. So I'm thinking those are going to be the 3 key guys out of the bullpen, but everybody will be available with the exception of Burkhalter, Gonzalez, and Bright. And Burkhalter is a guy, if you ask him to go, he'll go.
Right.
He probably shouldn't, like in the interest of self-preservation, but if they ask him to go, he would go.
Well, how you manage things is a little bit different in the postseason, right? I mean, I think Burkhalter would rather go again and continue the season. And so that'll be fun to see how Coach Thompson and Tim Hudson handle that.
Yeah, and I think like at worst or at best you would get him for maybe an inning. I mean, he threw 39 pitches on Monday night. So at best, I think you might get him for an inning, but that's something it's definitely going to be a break glass in case of emergency. The goal is going to be Barnett go as deep as he can, some combination of a Swilling. If they have to break glass on Carson Skipper and bring him out, they will. He is set up as of now. The plan is Mason Barnett, and then after him, Carson Skipper, and then Joseph Gonzalez, and that gets you to the championship round. So as of now, they're looking at Carson Skipper as Wednesday starter. But like you said, if you lose Tuesday, you don't have a Wednesday.
Yep. So Auburn has to win 3 games to get to the national championship series. So we'll see. The first of those 3 is obviously later today, 6:00 tonight, and it will be. I'm sure it'll be miserable. I'm sure it will be very close. I'm sure it will be very stressful, and I can't wait. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Yes, as of right now, top of the 5th, it is 10-3 Ole Miss. So unless things change, which Arkansas can score a lot of runs,
so it'll be Ole Miss. I think this is I was asked this on WNSP Monday afternoon with Dave Schultz. He asked which is better for Auburn. And I told him it would be better for Ole Miss to beat Arkansas because I think Auburn has a better chance of beating Ole Miss twice than Arkansas twice. That was my thought process. How off am I on that?
I think you're right. And I think a big reason that you're right there comes down to the pitching. I mean, Ole Miss and Dylan DeLucia was as good as advertised on Saturday. My goodness.
Right.
But Ole Miss is on plans D, E, and F when it comes to the rotation. They have lost the 3 guys that beat Auburn in Auburn earlier in the year. And so if Ole Miss wins on Monday night and you play Arkansas, I feel better about beating Arkansas once and Ole Miss twice than I do about beating Ole Miss once and Arkansas twice.
Right.
Arkansas is playing today like it's a bullpen game. It's kind of odd. They're on their 4th pitcher already, and it's the 5th inning. And so the mindset going into this game very much from Arkansas's coaches feels like it's we're going to win, and then we're off tomorrow, and everybody gets a day off. So if Ole Miss beats them, Arkansas is a little bit depleted. They've had a bunch of guys go, and now they either have to do a back-to-back or they're going to the alternate options out of the bullpen. So I want this score to keep up.
I mean, obviously, Auburn's path to being, in that final series is ridiculously difficult. But
4 teams.
Yep, that's where we're at. That's where we are at. There's 6 teams left in college baseball, and the Tigers, they're one of them. And if they win the matchup tonight, they'll be in the Final 4, which is very, very cool.
Of
Lindsay,
the 6 teams, obviously Auburn's one of them. They have played 4 of the other 5 this season. If that tells you what kind of schedule a team in the SEC West plays week in and week out, because they've played everybody who's left in the field but Notre Dame.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they have a Notre Dame pitcher on staff. So we'll count. We'll count.
Yeah. I mean, we beat them because we have their guy. So that's how it works.
That's right. Yep. We won Tommy Sheehan from them. Lindsay, how can people read everything you have going on as well as hear you every day?
So I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. The previews, the recaps, all that stuff for all of this Auburn baseball is at auburndaily.com. My podcast, Locked On MLB Prospects, is available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You can find it on Twitter at Locked On Farm, and the merch at aushirts.com.
Absolutely. That is baseball's Lindsay Crosby joining us. Tomorrow, it's a War Report Wednesday, and we'll be joined by Lindsay again to recap, hopefully an Auburn win. We'll have to wait and see. See you tomorrow right here on Locked On Auburn.